Hi everyone. Okay, we're going to go ahead and read chapter 7. Now, chapter 7 is, I believe, the last bit in our story, Who Was Thomas Alva Edison? So, we're going to be able to jump in to the rest of it very soon. Okay, this chapter is titled Always Inventing. Tom was a man who never ran out of ideas. Although Tom was hard of hearing, he never lost his hearing completely. He didn't let it become a problem. Even when his hearing got worse as he got older, In fact, he said it was a good thing because he could ignore noise swirling around him. He could concentrate on what was important to him. At one point, Tom was told that an operation might cure his deafness. He didn't want it, and he was not interested in developing a hearing aid. Let's look at the picture that's on this page. But that's pretty cool. Everyone has things that kind of hold them back, and it would be kind of a bummer if you couldn't hear. But he didn't let it bother him. That's cool. Tom found ways to work around his problem. He managed to listen to piano players trying out for his phonograph recordings by biting a metal plate attached to the piano. This allowed him to hear the music through the vibrations traveling through his jawbone. Cool. Was he listening through his teeth? So much is known about Tom's work because of the records he kept. Over his 70 years of inventing, he filled 4,000 notebooks and wrote and drew over 3 million notes, letters, and sketches. Can you imagine that? I mean, that is a lot of stuff, but that's a lot of work, isn't it? So to become really, really successful, you got to put a lot of work into it. It's not just something that happens like that. You got to practice and you got to enjoy what you're doing. Very cool. Not all of Tom's ideas were success. In 1891, he bought a mine in northwestern New Jersey. He wanted to find a way to produce low-grade iron ore by separating it from a rock and sand. But after 10 years, he had to give up when rich deposits of high-grade iron ore were found in Minnesota. By this time, Tom had lost millions of dollars. So, does every idea turn out good? No, he lost 10 years. He worked on something for 10 years and it didn't work at all. That stinks. But he still did so much, didn't he? Still, Tom's experience with mining led him to another business, cement. He came up with a way to pour a cement house in just 6 hours, using molds and machinery that had developed in his mining business. His cement was used to build New York's Yankee Stadium and the Panama Canal. Now it was the turn of the century. Automobiles were about to burst on the scene. Tom was convinced that an electric car would be the best car for the future. That's pretty cool. There are electric cars now, aren't there? He set out to make a battery to run a car on electricity. He knew it would be cleaner than the gas that other inventors were trying, but he had to make a battery that would store enough electricity to run a car for a long time. It also had to be cheap enough to make. Let's learn a little bit about Henry Ford. Henry Ford was the first to make a car cheap enough for most Americans to buy. In 1908, his most popular car, the Model T, cost $500, and he had more orders than he could fill. Within 2 years, Ford came up with his assembly line. Workers assembled or put together each car. Each man worked on one part only. As the car traveled along a moving belt, workers on either side added the next parts needed. As the end of the line of a complete car was driven off, ready for a customer, Ford made a Model T for 19 years. He sold over 15.5 million of them in America. Tom finally came up with a good storage battery, but he was too late for cars. By 1903, Henry Ford was selling his gasoline-powered Model A to customers. Tom's storage battery became very useful, even though it didn't power cars like Ford's. The Navy used it to light ships and to power torpedoes. The railroad lit cars and signaled lights with it. Some delivery trucks were powered by it, so were the lights on coal miners' helmets. Amazingly, the storage battery became his biggest money maker. Perhaps that surprised even Tom, who had once expected his phonograph to grow up to be a big fellow and support me in my old age. So his battery was one of the best things he actually made. We don't hear about that very much, do we? We don't really hear that much about it. But that was one of the things he made that really has changed a lot. With all of Tom's success, he was always ready to move on to the next idea. The same was true of his failures. He didn't look back and complain, and he never gave up until he had tried every possibility. Tom once said, "You come across anything and you don't understand. You don't rest until you run it down. Most fellers try a few things and then quit. I never quit until I find what I'm after." I love that. Never quit. Never give up. I love it. Tom worked in a time when many others were racing to think up and invent the next great idea. The world seemed alive with possibilities. Tom understood work. He liked it. He once said, "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration." That's sweat. Ick. Of genius, he said, "Sticking to it is the genius." In 1914, a fire raged through some of West Orange buildings, but even that did not discourage Tom. He started rebuilding immediately, but even Tom could be narrow-minded. He had nothing good to say about the radio. He was sure it wouldn't last. Think for a second, how many of you have a radio? Or if you listened to a radio before? Yeah, I think there's definitely radios around all the time now. As Tom got older, he didn't stop working. There are photographs of Tom in his 70s, still going to West Orange. When he was 65, he had a time clock installed. His workers punched in their cards to record the time they arrived and the time they left. So did Tom. Over the years, Tom received many awards. In 1928, the U.S. Congress gave him a special medal for his lifetime of achievement. "I have accomplished all I promised," he said. During the last 15 years of Tom's life, he went on trips with old friends, among them Henry Ford, tire maker Harvey Firestone, and naturalist John Burroughs. They traveled to the Great Smoky Mountains around New England and to Michigan. They called their vacations together camping, but they were well taken care of by helpers who pitched their tents, took care of their clothes, and cooked their meals. Tom and Mina spent time at the vacation home Tom had built soon after their marriage. It was in Fort Myers, Florida. Of course, it had a laboratory. During the last 2 years of his life, Tom suffered from a number of ailments, among them diabetes and a stomach ulcer, and his health declined. In August 1931, he collapsed at Glenmont. He died on October 18th at the age of 84. Mina lived another 16 years. Tom's funeral on Wednesday, October 21st, was private, but that evening, at the request of President Herbert Hoover, Americans turned off their lights at 10 in the evening. For 1 minute, all of the United States, there was darkness in honor of Thomas Alva Edison, the man who lit up the world. So he had a very long and very happy life, and after he died, the entire country turned off their light for 1 minute. Very cool, guys. Very cool. So, what I want you guys to do tomorrow is take a look at the timeline that we have going on the back pages of this, and make sure that you kind of look over the videos and look through the book for anything that you need help with your summative, okay? Other than that, that's it. Thank you so much for watching this with me. I love seeing you guys. Alright, you guys have a wonderful night. Bye, everyone.